that the second coming of Christ is not an external phenomena. It's the second coming is the coming of consciousness. It's waking up. It's becoming aware. That's available to everybody now. You don't even have to leave your front room for this.
Whether you're looking for the truth, wanting to hear the answers to the big questions of life, or whether you just want to feel more self-sovereignty, this is the Andi Steele Podcast. Welcome to the Andi Steele Podcast. Today, I speak with Geoff Thompson, Bafta Winning Writer, filmmaker, teacher, and martial artist. This is the Andi Steele Podcast. The first thing I should do is welcome you to the Andi Steele Podcast. Thanks, Geoff, for coming on.
Thank you for asking me.
Well, mate, it's a pleasure. I thought I'd start off with kind of like, how I knew you, how I got to know you, because I thought I haven't met Geoff before, and I thought actually I have, and I thought I don't think we've like met like how you doing type thing. But I think I want to say 20 years ago, and just make sure that mic's. You can hear me all right, can't you?
Yeah,
that's all. That's cool. Yeah, I think it was like I want to say 20 years ago, and I was a doorman. I was like, into the whole kind of pavement arena thing. And I came on a course with Mo Teague, and I think he was presenting there with you. Yeah. So I lived down in Weymouth. Yeah. And he's like, do you want to come on up and, support me and all that? So I think it might have been his first talk. So it was really, really odd for him. So it was, Was
it in Coventry?
I think it must have been, yeah. It was quite, yeah.
Yeah.
I think so. And then obviously that was the first time, I'd obviously heard about you and read books and stuff like this. And but that was the first time. And then obviously the second time was, and I don't want to kind of pounce this on you, but it's kind of a thank you really, because I was that boy, you say in one of your talks, there's, this is, for that person that's up at 4 a.m., and that was that was me, a 38-year-old boy. So I just want to thank you first and foremost, get the hardest bit out of the way for me, and just say thanks to you personally, face to face.
Oh, that's very kind of you. Thank you, Andy.
Oh, it's a pleasure. And
I always said I when I was younger and struggling with depression and not understanding it, and waking up at 4 a.m. in a cold sweat, thinking it's going to be another long day, and how am I going to get through? I thought, when I find the truth, I want to share it, so that if there are other kids out there who are waking up at 4, they might be able to access this talk, this book, this article from somebody like me who says, I've been there and there's a way through. So it's really good that it's nice when you hear from people that say that was me. I was waking up at 4 in a cold sweat, and the stuff really does help, because obviously truth is spirit. When you talk, when you write, or when you talk, or when you record things, the spirit of what you're saying, the truth of what you're saying is actually in the ink. It's recorded in the ink. So when it comes off the page, it acts as a vibration, and it can neutralize negative feelings. It can just bring in, even if it just brings in curiosity. The mind has a strange quirk. It can't handle curiosity and fear at the same time. So if we're curious and we have inquiry, if it's just that, it'll neutralize the fear for long enough for us to go, I'm going to inquire about this. I've had these feelings for a long time. I've felt depressed for a long time, or I felt dissatisfied for a long time. I'm curious about that. I want to try and find out what that is. And the curiosity automatically switches the fear down to dim. So we're able to go, because we know there are answers, because there are people out there who have found answers. Consciousness tells us that, and eschatology tells us that everything is already available everywhere. We're just not aware of it. Consciousness just means what we are aware of. So if we can expand our awareness, the answer to our problems, the answer to our fears, the answer to our ills are already out there. And we know that because people have found it. People have found a way through. So if it just triggers inquiry, a bit of hope, curiosity, rather than going, here's that feeling again, and I've got to try and run away from it or hide from it, you go, oh, I'm going to have a look at it this time. When it comes this time, I'm going to have a look at it and I'm going to examine it. Maybe it's not a harbinger of doom. Maybe it's a messenger of hope, which it proved to be for me. So the legendary Mo Teague brought me down to one of our courses. I love Mo Teague.
Yeah.
He brought you down to one of our courses, and you know, like I say, sometime later, you've been able to access that message because your consciousness has expanded, because obviously you've made the effort to go down. So your consciousness has expanded to bring me into your viewpoint.
Yeah.
Even if it's through a rear view mirror, you can look at that and go, oh, maybe this guy has something that might help me through this particular depression or this particular issue, this particular problem. But there's a lovely saying in esoteric practice: first we do, and then we hear. So we don't hear, we don't get the advice until we act. So we have to act first. In the Quran, it says that God favors those who strive. He doesn't favor those who don't strive. It basically means the universe responds to action. So the moment you act and you move into your fear, you automatically start to get a wider expanse, a wider consciousness. So it's good. It's good to hear.
Yeah, it's just, I was just thinking, it's like so hard to, like you said, I think that bit of curiosity is like the bit that can get you across the threshold, just to, you know, just to dim, like you said, just to dim that enough, just to take some action. And it's a beautiful thing how, I mean, it's been a long time over the years getting to a point where I'd almost allow myself to be aware of that, if you know what I mean, within me. And it's funny how it's like I'm searching out people and how things come across. And then, you know, and it was because early days I was, you know, I think what resonated with me, and I'm sure a lot of people from what I've read and seen on comments, but for me, it was hit me hard when about just the kind of violent aspect, if you would, for want of a better word. It's like, why am I so angry with me? And I think I don't know what it was, one talk, and I was just like, oh, it just hit me around the face. And I thought, that's me. And I was like, I've trodden that path. And I was like, God, it was weird. And it was like, oh my God, but it gave me a permission. And there's a question I've written down for later on, but it was kind of like, you know, what's your feeling on kind of advice given versus storytelling, etc. to, you know, speaking rhetorically, I suppose, in a way, but the power of, and, you know, Andy, you need to sort your life out and all this versus just sharing your story. And I think what's your view on that?
Well, stories, you know, my raison d'etre, my dharma, if you like, is to tell my story, because I was a man who was massively curious, very excited about being in the world, and that was interrupted and hijacked at the age of 11 when I was sexually abused. So my will or my autonomy was stolen from me at a young age by somebody that implanted a parasite, a cognitional parasite. So the cognitional, the belief was that nobody can be trusted. The world can't be trusted. Not even the people you love, they can't be trusted. That was what was planted in me as a parasite at the age of 11. That created depressions, it created dissonance, it created psychotic jealousy, self-harm, sexual self-harm. Later on, I displaced it into prolific violence. People have an idea that I'm a bit of a Robin Hood character, but I was actually a very insecure and violent guy. You know, if anybody out there has a fantasy about me being a great bloke, I used to kick people's teeth out. You know, I was, you know, at the back of it, I was a nice guy, but I was violently insecure and I had enough skills to do a lot of damage. So that was all a byproduct or a displacement of the abuse that happened when I was young. So, but I remember suffering massively with depression because of this, with fear, with anxiety. At the peak of it, if my wife left the room, I believe she was betraying me, because why wouldn't she? I'm a piece of shit. People that love me have betrayed me. This was my grooming. I was gaslighted to believe that. It's a very powerful parasite. And that parasite, you could say that it's like a quantum entanglement. When two particles get entangled, they can be separated, across the universe, but they still communicate with each other. But they don't even need to communicate. They're not seen as separate. So this person, when he abused me, entangled himself with me. So even though I didn't see him for 20 years and we were separated by many miles, he was still abusing me in his absence. He was still abusing me remotely, because if I had a feeling about him, it would rouse all sorts of pornographic imagery, you know, violent pornography, sexual pornography.
Right.
And this person would abuse me remotely from a distance. So I was quantumly entangled with this person. And the only way to untangle is to, what they say is we never thought we'd come to quantum entanglement, but the only way to disentangle is to become more entangled in something else.
Right.
So
Okay.
rather than be entangled with the abuse of this person, I became entangled with curiosity,
Right.
with inquiry. I was an autodidact. I went out there and thought, I'm going to learn. But the key to my learning, Andy, was that I wanted to share the learning. Because I remember thinking,
Right.
there must be a lot of kids out there just like me, with a family, with kids, who are lonely, who are lying in bed, terrified of another day, but not quite sure why they're terrified. And then ashamed of the fact that they're terrified because maybe I'm a lump, or, you know, I'm a man, or I've got all of these cultural expectations.
Yeah.
And I'm following my wife around the house like a puppy because I'm so afraid. I'm like Mesna when he climbs Nanga Parbat. I'm too scared to go up. I'm too scared to go down. I'm too scared to stay where I am. When Mesna was trapped on Nanga Parbat, the mountain, he said he was afraid to live. He was afraid to be away from his wife. That's what I felt. So the idea of telling your story is saying, you could say I'm a Buddha Dharma. You know, Buddha Dharma is somebody that's escaped from a burning building, and recognize that there are still people stuck in the building, but they don't know the way out.
Right.
So I'll go back into the building to say, I found a way out. So that's basically what I do. I just say, these are my stories. This is what I've learned. This is how I got out of depression. This is how I got out of fear. This is how I got out of small living. And you don't have to follow if you don't want to. I'm just saying, these are my tips. This is what I've learned. And so you pass those stories on, and those stories, they literally contain spirit. So when I talk, when I'm, they call it Kota Dharma Gaku or Heka, the use of magic sound. I'm using sound to exchange soul for soul. So if you're listening, or if there's some kid out there listening now who's troubled, he will, if he feels inspired, it means he has received spirit. To be inspired means to be in spirit. So he's received spirit from me or through me, and that spirit will give him enough inspiration to start making inquiries, to start studying, to start expanding his awareness. Because everything they want is out there. Everything anybody wants is out there. But people are so entangled in their own small beliefs, or their fears, or their culture, or the mores, you know, their class. They're so indentured into these kind of invisible ideologies that they can't expand their consciousness. They daren't. You know, it's this belief is so solid that it's creating a reality every day that they don't want. So the idea of me telling my story and you telling your story is that we send this spirit out into the world. One of the agreements when you have a covenant with God is that I will receive information from you, but I will give it out to whoever asks for it. So you put that out there in the hope and in the knowledge that somebody at some point will open this up, and it will be a revelation. It will take them on a path that they just never anticipated, and it will excite them. It will say, you know, your potential is limitless. You know, this machine that you're in is priceless, but you need to be in charge of it. So when somebody steals our willpower, because that's the key. If they steal our will with conditioning, or they steal our will with fear, or they steal our will with propaganda, or with fear, or with arousal, if they steal our will from us and we haven't got a strong will, we are not in charge of this kingdom. So we have to win our will back. And we do that through study, through self-education, through putting ourselves in front of teachers, but mostly by doing the work. If we can't turn up, if we can't pick up a book, if we can't invest our money into some teaching or a book, you know, we're not being seen to do the work. I remember this lovely story about this guy. It was a really good story. He said to me, he said, I looked at you on the internet and I thought, yeah, I really like this guy. I really need to be in front of him. And he said, but he's too expensive, and his books are too expensive. This is probably a guy that was spending, you know, 30 or 40 quid a week on takeaways and coffees, but right. 10 quid is too much for 30 years worth or 40 years worth of experience in. But so that's the ego sabotaging him. So it's too expensive. It's a you know, and it's, you know, he's asking too much, and, you know, there's an agenda, and he talked himself out of it with all of these house ghosts. And then he said you advertised online that you were doing a free talk in Coventry, and I said, oh, I thought I'm going to go to that. And then I thought, why have I got to go all the way to Coventry to listen to this guy talk? Then he said, I realized that even if you'd have turned up at my house and said, I'm going to talk to you through your window, it would still be too much of a cost, because my ego doesn't want to speak to you, because my ego will be dissolved by what you've got to say. Yeah,
it's hitting me there, like with talk today. I'm like, oh shit, it's Gabriella's like, yeah, how about tomorrow? And I was like, I'm like, and I'm not ready. And yeah, the same thing was like, nah, over here. And literally that's like, and I'm like, nah, I gotta, you know, you gotta face the stuff, like, you know. And it's
first we do, and then we hear. We don't hear if we don't turn up. We don't hear if we don't do the work. And of course, the ego is going to sabotage you. It's going to try to stop you from accessing expanded awareness, because, you know, there's an old saying, I think it was one of the Greek philosophers says that those who learn suffer. Right. So the part of us that doesn't want to learn suffers in the learning. It actually is consumed in the act of learning. So when you travel to Coventry, or, you know, you buy a book, or you sit down and study a text, the part of you, the energy that is used to do that study is consumed, just like when you consume energy when you do a weight training session. Mm-hmm. So the ego is sacrificed in the volition of study. So every time we study, every time we meditate, every time we put ourselves away from our comfort zone and expand our awareness, the ego will try to stop you, because the ego is the fuel that is consumed in the act of expanding. Now, the ego doesn't actually die. The ego is just transcended, but because the ego has a very limited perspective, it feels as though learning is death. So it will do everything it can to sabotage learning, and it will do everything it can to convince you that the person that you're going to learn off is a fraud. I've had people turn up at my class and then looked in and seen 100 people there and gone, oh, this guy's just here for the money, and gone again. They got right to the class, right to the class. So the idea is that first we do, then we hear. The moment you do stuff, especially if it's stuff you're very afraid of, what you will hear will be a revelation. And then you pass it on to other people. When you pass it on to other people, you learn even more. So one of the reasons I teach, and one of the reasons I do talks, is because that part of the knowledge is held off, and I only actually receive it when I deliver it. Gotcha. So we don't really know fully what we know until we share it with others. So God, or the universe, or this omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresent power will say, I'll hold 20% of it back. When you share it with other people, I'll give you that 20. A bit like when you bring a builder in and he goes, well, pay me a little bit up front.
That's a good deal,
and pay me the rest when the job's done. It's a good deal. Yeah.
It makes sense. It makes sense. I mean, it's the thing is, you know, I remember I was, you know, talking about the ego. It's like, and if you've had a taste of it in the past, if you've ever had a taste of, you know, kind of, you know how it works. And it's like, I got to that point where I was like, yeah, but then everyone will know me, and then everyone will know this stuff. And it's like, but you know, that's the way forward. And then the ego steps in and, you know, to cover it up. But I know I'm not going to get any, you know, anything without doing it. It's that kind of, you know, and then it's a good deal, but it's at some point.
It's all in the doing. Yeah. We put ourselves out there, and we strip ourselves right the way back to that we are just an essential being. Anything superfluous, anything extraneous is stripped away. It's like an acid bath, a bit like a bodybuilder going into a competition. He just reduces himself to a raw, exposed muscle. So it's a similar kind of thing. Bodybuilders are very good to look at, actually. Especially someone like Dorian Yates,
Yeah.
whose life was a singularity. He dedicated himself and immersed himself fully in what he did. And when he immersed himself fully into that, he expanded, and so there was no one in the world could get anywhere near him. So we do the same spiritually. We take it, that's just an example, but if we want to expand our consciousness, then we get rid of everything that's blocking consciousness. So the parts of us that are afraid to learn, the parts of us that are afraid to commit, the parts of us that are not disciplined, the parts of us that, don't want to get up at 4 a.m. and meditate, or that they don't want to go for a run, or they don't want to turn up and do a talk in the middle of nowhere, or they don't want to expose themselves to the possible criticism when they speak their truth. All of those aspects of ourselves have to be stripped away. And like I said, I've been and done talks where I've been assailed from every single angle to stop me from getting to the talk. And the moment I've walked into the room, it's gone. It's absolutely gone. And all of that energy is consumed in the volition of me delivering the talk. And of course, once it's consumed, once I've reclaimed those parts of myself, consciousness is revealed. So consciousness is already there. Consciousness of everything is already there, but it's blocked. A bit like you can block the sun with a penny. If you put a penny like that, you can block the sun.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that there's no sun. It just means that it's temporarily blocked, or a cloud blocks the sun. So the Buddhists call it the clear view. They say there's no such thing as problems. The only problem is believing that there's a problem. But they said there is a clear view. So we have to remove the things that obscure us from the clear view. How do we know what they are? Well, it's simple. Move towards the thing you really want to do, and those things will become visible. They'll speak to you. They have a voice. They're terrified of exposure.
I was just going to say, you're just saying then about, I've had so many times, and I'm sure people do, where they suddenly, it gets harder and harder and harder, and that little voice is going, see, this isn't supposed to happen. And it's like, what do but actually, like you said, when you cross that, you get there and it's done. See, actually, that the harder it got, it was just you getting closer to it. And it was, no, don't go, don't do it. And
that's why it's really important to win your will back, to have discipline, to have control of your palate, to have control of your endocrine system, the adrenals, have control of the nervous system, have control of we got guys that are massive lumps, but they can't even control the muscle in their tongue. They can't stop themselves crucifying people over a coffee at Costa. So we need to win back our autonomy, and we win back our autonomy by recognizing where we are out of balance and bringing ourselves back into alignment. So winning the will is important. The mystic Richard Rose says, there's no point trying to change the world while we still can't blow our own nose.
That's so true. Yeah.
No point trying to change the world when we can't change our own waist measurement. The aspiration is good, but it won't come from actually working in the world per se. It will come from working on the self. So we look at ourselves in the mirror and go, okay, if I want to take some control of my reality, have I got control of the vehicle? Am I driving a Ferrari, or is this an old banger that I don't even put oil into the tank of, So personal will is personal autonomy is the kingdom. So when you read in some of the Bibles, seek the kingdom of God, enter the Holy Land, enter the land of milk and honey, enter the land of Canaan. It's all allegory. The word land comes from the root word will. So it's saying enter the will, and then you will find the milk and honey. Enter the will, which is the access to the kingdom, and all other things will come to you. So first of all, we have to win our will. And we have to recognize that the books out there to help us do that are already written. That all of the Bibles are out there. Most people don't look at the Bibles because they mistake religion for dogma. They think that religion creates lots of problems, but Religion just means to be aligned. That's all it means. So we need to avoid dogma. Dogma says this is the only way. We need to be encouraged to look at all of the books if they present themselves. Look at the Gita, look at the Torah, look at the Mahabharata, look at the Srimad Bhagavatam, look at the there are just so many different books, so many accesses to information and knowledge. If you bought a copy of the Gita, for instance, just placing it into your house, just having it in your house without even looking at it, or if you bought a copy of the Torah, just bringing it into the house and sitting on the shelf will expand your consciousness. It will expand you automatically because there's a part of you that's saying, I want to know what's in that book.
Yeah.
I want to understand what's in that book. So that's you turning towards consciousness. And when we turn towards consciousness and take one step, it takes 10 steps towards us, because this energy it's looking for you as much as you're looking for it.
It's a funny one, that it's like, I feel like that's sometimes the battle, for me anyway, personally, is that I'm battling that. I'm doing this with myself, and it's like, just let go. What are you fucking scared of? Just, and then this is all like over here. I'm like, no. It's like the acceptance of your own. What was you said earlier on about is it Buddha Dharma? Your mission is to share the story.
Oh, so the Dharma,
as in, so it's, sometimes I feel like I'm doing just that. It's calling and whatever it may be for everybody else, but it's like, my battle and my tiredness and is from that self-depression, if you would, of not accepting that way forward and doing the work.
Part of you is resisting it because it's going to be consumed in the act of creating it.
Yeah, and it's
what is your Dharma, if you don't mind me asking?
I think if I'm honest with you, I got a question about the divine, and I wanted to kind of touch upon that with some of your latest books about what is the divine and stuff. But I was doing some work recently, and I think the vocation is too very similar to yours, and just share the stories and share the experiences. That seems to be the thing that I'm avoiding the most, is speaking my truth and just speaking.
Good. Knowing that, where there's most resistance, there's most reward.
Everything is so, it's not bizarre, because I kind of get it from what we're saying. Everything, like recently with the whole the COVID and all that jazz, I've done U-turns on things, but really everything is just U-turning me towards the thing I don't want to fucking do. And it's it's just to speak honestly and openly and be me. And it's like, tell the truth, it takes
a lot of courage.
And it's like, oh God, it's like, no, you can't go there. It was a really weird thing.
But you're doing it now, Andy, aren't you?
Well, yeah. And that's why,
now. You reached out, you asked me to do a podcast, and I said, let's do it now.
Yeah.
You asked yesterday, and I said, let's do it tomorrow.
I know, I was like,
and you're here doing it. So
and I think
you are doing it,
Yeah. It's it is. It's one of those things, crossing the threshold. I tried to get in my way to do it today. I was like, right, no, I can't do that. This ain't right. Blah, 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 blah. Then I get here and I'm like, oh, he's late. And I'm like, he ain't late. It's not even bloody fucking 1 o'clock yet. And I'm like, well, maybe they haven't,
I'm going to be late. I'm not doing it now.
Well, yeah, almost. I'm like, well, and it's that ego childness in me just saying, this is, what am I doing? But it's,
the ego is terrified of information, because those who learn suffer. But the suffering is a divine suffering. It's a transitional suffering. All you're doing really, you obviously, because of your background, you'll be very aware of weight training, martial arts training. So that when you find the burn in the gym, that's where the growth is. We know that we burn up fat. The muscle burns up fat in order to grow and to get stronger. And we relish that burn, don't we? We go in the gym and we try to find the burn quickly. And we stay in the burn long. We develop exercises to keep us in the burn. Spiritual growth is exactly the same. It's just it's more emotional than it is physical. But if you can handle the burn of working in the gym and working as a martial artist, if you can handle the confrontation of being a nightclub bouncer, it's the same process. Working as a bouncer is a very metaphysical pursuit, because you are guarding the doorway to a club. When you're working metaphysically, you're guarding the doorway to your own heart or to your own will. but you have to develop the you have to place 4 hefty doormen on the doorway to your kingdom. So what I did as a nightclub bouncer was the most metaphysical thing I ever did, because same as you, I had to face life and death on those doors to defend a shitty nightclub. But when I look at it now, 30 years later, I realize it was teaching me how to guard the doorway to my own kingdom, to my own autonomy. Our autonomy is stolen off us every single day, Andy, by 20 angry stories on the news before breakfast.
Yeah.
We're much more likely to shake our fist at Donald Trump than we are to look in the mirror and go, yeah, I'm still overweight. Yeah, I'm still accessing sexual pornography. Yeah, I'm still gossiping about people. Yeah, I'm still not doing what my Dharma's asking me to do.
Mm-hmm.
I've got this amazing kingdom and I haven't got no control of it. This is like Odysseus when he comes back from the Trojan Wars. He comes back to his kingdom at Ithaca. It's an allegory. And it's been overrun by vagabonds, and they're trying to court his wife. And he's so changed by the Trojan Wars that his servants and his family and even his wife don't recognize him.
Okay.
But when he gets back from the Trojan Wars, he has to go in and he has to win his kingdom back again by any means possible. So that's how we are. We wake up and we go, God, I'm in a kingdom. I've got this amazing kingdom. I've got all this potential. But we're not in charge of it. We've got no control of it because it's overrun by addictions. It's overrun by false beliefs, by anger, by any of the vices. You know, we haven't got control of it. We haven't got autonomy of, even though it's our kingdom, we are no longer sovereign. So the internal war, what in Islam they call it the greater jihad, the greater war, is when we go in and we win back our sovereignty. And we start doing that by getting control of our palate, what we eat, what we drink, what we ingest, what we see through our eyes, what we hear, our environment.
Sorry, Geoff. I was going to say, that was one of the questions I wanted to ask you about, and I presumed you'd probably answer it at some point, as we do. But that, just wanted to touch upon it for I know lots of people who, because you like yourself, you see people, and to some people that are similar ages or below, they're heavily violent people, but all I see is, it's you learn to see the real people behind all that stuff.
Absolutely.
And it was like, so the question was, I wanted to stamp on really, was with regards to violence, how do you tame that? And, where does it sit now for you? Because for me personally, I'm thinking I've tamed it, but I wouldn't want to get rid of it, because it's a useful set of tools, So I suppose the first part.
What's it useful for, Andi?
It depends. For me personally, I don't know. I suppose I'll tell you what it does for me. I'll tell you this. It sits down right at the bottom. I remember someone asking me, actually, I was doing some talking on this course I was on, and they said, they walked over. He's like, hi, they're doing a project on something to do with gravitas, and if they're listening, they probably know who they are. And he just come up to me and he said, hi, just wanted to know, how you got this presence and this talking and all this stuff. I said, yeah, give us come and see me in a minute. And I thought, I'll give him a quick test. Like, does he want to know? Does he really want to know? Is he just flapping his gums? So he comes and like gently sits next to me. He's like, hi, I'm all right, mate. And he said, oh, so, how do you do it? And I said, see if this puts this person off. Because I said, you want to know the truth? The bottom line is, I said, I'm not afraid to close that door. And, physically, I'm not worried about that element. It's at the bottom. I'd never use it, but I know that if I had to, I've got that in there. And it, I thought was like, why am I doing all these, learning all how to kill people and all this jazz for years? And I never used it, as much as I'd like, but I know it's something that I think sits right at the bottom, and it's the last resort of all things. And then on top of that, I've kind of built ways to get out of it, so I don't have to. So it becomes like the, so
So what I had to ask myself was, who am I without that? And I wasn't much. So I've got a big right hand. I can knock people out. It's a fail safe. But who am I without it? Have I got a center? What is behind that big right hand? Nothing. There was nothing behind it. There was no center. That big right hand was defending an insecure little boy
Yeah.
that was inside me, that was afraid of the world.
Mm.
Do you know what Budo means? Budo means without arms. So
Right.
at some point we have to let go of those physical skills. We can't go through the narrow gate with those physical skills, because the moment we go, well, I've got this here just in case things kick off. That means we're always anticipating that it might kick off. So we've got to get to the point where we go, I'm not going to rely on those physical skills anymore. I'm going to rely on a higher force. I'm going to rely on a center that dissolves threat the moment it enters into my proximity. So I'm not saying abandon it today, because it's
there's
got
definitely
you to where you are.
Yeah, I'm working on that.
Yeah, you've got, you know, the martial aspect is really important, but at some point we have to let go of, if we want to go into Buddha, we have to let go of the ability to be able to kill somebody, because they're only enemies of our own making anyway. So we create enemies. We forget we've created them, then we create tools and skills to defend ourselves against the very enemies that we've created. They're our creations. They come from they are projected from our own shadow. So when we stop creating these enemies, when we find a true center, there will be no enemies. There'll be no need for tools for enemies to defend against enemies. There'll be no illnesses. There'll be no need for remedies from illnesses.
Because
there'll be no viruses. There'll be no need for antidotes to viruses. So at some point, we have to recognize that, you know, like in one of my films, an imam says to this guy who basically is a good guy, but he exists on the fact that he can knock people out. He says, who the fuck are you without that right hand? And he realizes, when I wrote it, I was jarred. I remember thinking, fucking hell, who am I? Who am I without that right hand? You know, so we've got to be able to turn up and have gravitas, and we've got to be able to turn up and have charisma and have a center without all of the external stuff, without all of that. Because I know some of my very good friends who haven't gone into Budo willingly have had all of those skills stripped from them, either with strokes or with illnesses. So suddenly they're in a place where they don't have those skills, and they go and they ask yourself, who am I without those skills? Obviously, we have to develop a very strong core in order to exist on a nightclub door. But at some point, we have to be prepared to let go of that safety valve. In judo, they call it giving up the ippon yari. We give up our best technique. So if my best technique is a kouchi-gari, and I can take everybody over with a kouchi-gari at will, who am I without the kouchi? So I'm made to train for 6 months without using kouchi. It forces me to find other techniques. So the restriction training is not just to go, I've got that in case it kicks off. You ask yourself, why am I still expecting it to kick off? If it's me that's creating the reality around me, why haven't I got enough control to make sure that doesn't happen? So then it becomes an internal game. So all of my physical stuff was amazing, because it got me to a place where I thought, I have a presence and I have a skill and I found a truth. But in order to go to the next truth, I've got to convert all that to the internal game. So then we go into a room and go, who am I without my right cross? Who am I without my Bafta? You know, who am I without a copy of my book? I should have that certainty inside me. That certainty that I'm connected to everything, they call it yakim in Islam, is my real gravitas. So all the other stuff has a gravitas, but it only really lasts while you're the best fighter in the room. And if someone comes into the room who's a better fighter than you,
exactly.
Well, if you've got a big right cross and he's got a big knife, or you've got a big knife and he's got a big gun, or you've got a big gun and he's got a machine gun, or if you've got a machine gun and he's got a cannon, I mean, you see what I mean? It's temporal.
It's
and
like
comes from a place of insecurity.
Sorry, I was going to say, it's like the phrase tilting at windmills. Have you heard, about that? Yeah, I never knew about it for ages. Yeah, and someone told me about
tilting your lance at windmills. Yeah.
And I thought, what? I've never heard that before. And I was like, oh God. But I think for that, go back to that guy I spoke to. So we sat there and he kind of just went, and everyone a few people had gathered and they all dispersed, because I knew if they didn't inquire further with that, because what I was demonstrating wasn't that. And they just went, that was enough, because, like we were saying, I know that, you know, with or without that, it's actually a return to me, and me sitting in my own personal truths and being able to share that and know that, you know, I am that little boy, I am that vulnerable, and I'm, you know, I'm exploring that. And I don't think a lot of people don't want to go there. It's almost they'll oh yeah, you know, the level of, you know, oh, Andy's just like this, what makes him so whatever it was, he's, you know, what gives you that presence? And I said, it's just because I'm starting to fucking really get into myself, and I've exposed me to me. I'm becoming comfortable in my own skin. But the test was, if I just say that, well, yeah, okay, I guess it's, you know, and it's that. So the further generalization of inquiry for him stopped. The curiousness stopped. But if he'd have looked a bit closer, he would have, you know. And it's, you know, maybe it was wrong.
The great thing for me, Andy, was that God put me into places where that didn't count for anything. He put me into places where having a big right cross and being had to have a fight was actually detriments. When you go into intellectual circles and spiritual circles, and they know that's a weakness. This doesn't work. So what have you got? And of course, you still got stuff because you didn't build those skills without something. But, you know, I was placed into environments where where the people asking me to come and talk saying, look, you will be challenged here. Your truth will be challenged, and you're not going to have a right cross or a judo throw. You're going to have a center that's either true or not true. So you start to develop your center without the pads, without the gloves, without the boxing. And if people are frightened of you, if they're frightened of you at all, you've failed. All they should be, if there's any fear at all, it should be fear of being annihilated by your proximity, which is connected to the whole universe. As Ushba said, somebody said to Ushba, are you worried about people challenging you? He said, no, because if they walk towards me, they know they were taking on the whole universe. And that wasn't because he was a great martial artist. It was because he was deeply, deeply embedded in Buddha. His whole training was about peace, about love. He said the warrior's way was about connecting to love, which is an indivisible force. It's, you know, it's a force that can't be taken on. It'd be like a feather taken on a hurricane. So the idea is to recognize the areas where we can go, okay, I've got that. But when I go and talk to these directors, if they're scared of me at all, you know, in this business, I'm lost already. They're not going to listen. They're going to be so worried about whether or not I'm going to knock them out if they say the wrong thing. So most of the places I go, you know, they don't even know that I was a martial artist or a bouncer. And when somebody tells them, they don't believe it. Right. They just go, no.
They wouldn't.
No, they're just a soft, bold, inarticulate man. They don't see a fighter.
But that must be nice for you. Sorry, it must be nice for you though, because I think, like for me, I'm like, oh, thank God I haven't got to live up to that, especially locally for me. Or people that know you. And it's like, I don't know if you went through, I'm sure you've mentioned before about the shedding. Yeah, I'm sure you have. It was, I related to the kind of like, these people think I'm this and I'm not. And I'm living in this, like this orbit with them, living up to their shit. And it's like, that ain't me. And it's like, they almost want that to be me. And I'm like, I've got to, it was quite easy because I didn't have such a delicate family and everything to get rid of. But so many people are caught in that. And luckily for me, I could just, you know, I'm not.
The net, isn't it?
But for some, it's, it must be hard to try and be who you are. Yet, no, you're always this. This is who you are. So how dare you try and change?
Yeah. It's interesting. One of my friends said to me, I was talking about what you take when you go to a talk. You go and talk to some kids in prison. These are the things you can take. These are the proofs. You can take your Bafta. You can take your 8th Dan certificate. You can take, you know, your accolades, and they're your proof. And he said to me, this was many years ago, he said, wouldn't it be great to be to be able to just turn up and be the proof? I remember thinking, that's the level I'm aiming at. They don't know who I am. They should feel, this is what Rick Young said to me once. People should, when you walk into a room, people should be able to feel your presence without any knowing of what you're capable of doing. Don Drager, one of the great American martial artists, said that if you're in a room full of people, they should be better protected just because you're there. Not just because you could protect them against other people, but they're protected against you. You're not insecure. You're not going to lamp them if they say the wrong thing, you know. Otherwise, if we, you know, how can we call ourselves a master if someone can beat the horn in the car and pull us out of center? If someone can steal our autonomy just by beeping their car horn in a bit of road rage, we can't consider ourselves to be a master. To be a master is to be in the center and to stay in the center and to be embedded in the center and to recognize that proximity on its own is your power. Any need for external stimulus, any need for weaponry, any need for the ability to fight is a crack in the armory when you start going into Budo. It's a difficult thing to hear. It was a difficult thing for me to find because my whole security was built on war paint, body armor, a huge back, big arms, a big right cross. My security came from the fact that my worst thing comes to worst, I'll just knock them out because I could do that. And then when someone says, well, who are you without that? It's shocking, Andy. It's shocking because you go, I am fucking nobody without that. We need to be somebody without all that. You know, you don't look at Gandhi and think, well, Gandhi can have a fight. You look at Gandhi and go, this guy is so centered. He's so centered that he brought the British Empire to its knees in a peaceful manner. Look at someone like Aurobindo, the mystic Aurobindo. His center was so powerful that they said he sat in a room studying and writing, and there was a hurricane that nearly blew the house apart, and it never touched his room because he was so centered. So metaphysically, we affect everything. That's what we're aiming for. So that at some point, that means shedding the body armor. It means shedding the ability to have a fight. It's shedding the fact that we need people to be a little bit scared of us. You know, we've got to get rid of all that. There's certain rooms we won't be allowed into if we hold on to any of those skills. When we're going through this narrow gate, those skills won't exist. They won't work. We've got to be able to rely purely on our metaphysical center. The center is certainty. The certainty is that while I'm centered, I'm connected to everything. I'm protected by everything. But again, that's exciting because that's the inquiry. If somebody's listening to this now, and they're in the process of going from the physical to the Budo, that's a good line of inquiry for them. Especially if people are reacting negatively and going, "I can't do that, can't let go of that. That's nonsense." Any kind of strong emotion means that there's an insecurity there. And again, I'm talking about myself. I was a big guy. I was on the world stage. I was handling life and death situations on the door, but I was a very, very insecure guy. I did not have a center. If you took away my right cross, I was nothing. And that right cross can be taken just by somebody turning up with a knife, or just by somebody turning up with a gun, or just by someone who turns up who's got a bigger right cross than you. So, but when you have a metaphysical center, like a singularity, like this single point of origin, this kind of black hole at the very center of your being, those threats don't present because they don't exist. They only exist as a projection from us. So that's again, I'm not saying that someone's going to get this overnight. It takes years and years to even understand that there's something other than the physical. But when the physical is stripped off you because of accident or illness, you're either going to, live as a vulnerable person, or you're going to find Buddha. You're going to go and find it in a hurry because you recognize, I haven't got a center. But all the things you did to get yourself that physical armory, all of those tools, all of that learning is very valuable because it's the same process. The building the armory inside is the same process as when we built it outside. We go to extreme places and, we go to the places where we're afraid to go.
It's funny because I've seen it happen to I'm going through it myself with all types of stuff. But when you see it, people that are older and you go, oh my God, I used to look up to this guy, and they say maybe he's got an illness or something. And it's just, you see him again and it's like, wow, where's he gone? And it was like, wow, no way is that. And it's a fear, I think, a fear of letting go of, and I suppose actually it probably links into the question of how do you, and self-sovereignty. So how and I'm aware of everything you've said. So I don't want to be rhetorical about it as such, but how do you go from like sexual and abuse, self-abuse, and that whole thing toward, rather than to, self-sovereignty? Because it's a process, surely, like you're saying, it's you're on a road toward, you're going this way, rather than like, I've hidden away for a long time, so I didn't want to put that upon people, and I thought it was rude of me to put my shit in the room, because it's like vibrating out, and I'm like, oh, I don't want to put that on anybody, I need to sort that out. So how, and going from, sexual abuse, any kind of trauma abuse, towards, how do you get on the road towards self-sovereignty? And maybe what is self-sovereignty for you? Because I've heard you say, and I love that. I love those words. I think they're important.
Well, they call it apophatic theology, and it's the theology of negation. It sounds fancy, but really it just means nobody knows what God is, but we know what he isn't. So no one can tell you who they are, but they can tell you who they're not. And if we can get rid of who we're not, then we can locate who we are. In fact, who we are is the actual entity, the observer or the witness within us, that gets rid of the parts that are not. So we go, okay, perhaps I'm not sure who I am, but I know I'm not jealous. I know I'm not violent. I don't want my kids to be afraid of me. I don't want my friends to be afraid of me. I know I'm not jealous. I know I'm not envious. I know I'm not greedy. I exhibit all of those traits, but they're not me. That's not how I want to live. I know I'm not addicted to sexual pornography. I know I'm not insecure. I know they're not me. So by this process of negation, we're able to locate who we are. So the process of going, okay, I'm not jealous. That's not how I want to live. That is a violent emotion that I won't have in me. It's not who I am. There is an elemental in me that is working through me as a jealous personality. So when that trait rises up, that becomes my training. So I don't engage that part of me. When it rises up, I don't engage it. I don't identify with it. If I engage it and identify with it, and I think it and speak it, then I'm incarnated into that jealous entity, and then I leave karma in the world. I hurt my wife, or I hurt my friends, or whatever. So when it rises up, we observe it with an objective and a scrutinizing and an objective view. So we feel the emotions, we watch them. They rise up to the mind door, which is here at the Plender gap. Everything rises up, and at wherever it comes from, it wants to engage you at this point. So we put the bouncer on the door here. We observe it, and no matter how much we want to engage it, we don't engage it. We just watch it. We watch it curiously. We watch it until eventually, if it's not engaged, we'll feel it build up. You'll feel it build up as a massive feeling, emotion, and we watch it until because if we don't engage it, it will drop back down again. So we watch it with curiosity, and then watch in amazement as what rises falls away. So in esoteric practice, they call it feeding the bear. So when this bear of emotion rises up to be fed, do we engage it? Do we emotionally engage it? Do we identify with it? Do we let it incarnate us? If we do, then we feed the bear. We feed the shadow. Or is the shadow feeding you? So if it rises up and we don't engage it, and we go, that's not me, I'm not going to be violent, I'm not going to be jealous, I'm not going to be envious. If we don't feed it, if we can watch it objectively and not engage it, then it will feed us. In other words, that part of us that exists in us will be burnt up, and it will be removed, and it will reveal consciousness. So we have to win back the parts of us that have been stolen by the vices. So that's my process, is to wait for these emotions to rise and then challenge them. Do I want to live like this? Do I want my wife to be afraid not to have sex with me, because when she doesn't want to have sex with me, I bang the door and give her a cold back in bed and become monosyllabic? What is that? If I turn into my wife and she doesn't feel like a cuddle, and I fall out with her, that's violence. That's the very beginning of violence, because I'm gonna do things to trigger her adrenaline so that eventually she won't turn me down. That's not love.
No.
So we recognize that. When it rises up, we don't follow that. We don't engage it. So apophatic theology is that we find ourselves via negation. So when obviously every time I was able to watch an emotion rise and not engage it. Every time I beat it, I expanded, and that part of me contracted. Every time I expanded, it got stronger. So it became a weight training session. Every time I had the urge to gossip.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Every time I had the urge to gossip and trash somebody, I would resist it. I wouldn't talk about it. If someone said to me, that person is so-and-so, I'd go, I don't know him. He's been very kind to me, or sometimes I would just say, he speaks very highly of you.
And it's that,
kill it.
Catching yourself on, isn't it? Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's that, it's interesting because I catch myself and I'm like, where am I going? And I think
why am I doing this? If I was to put a tape recorder and tape all this, would I want my friend to hear it? Would I be happy for him to hear it?
Yeah. It was horrible. It's like, where does that, and then reusing that as an energy. And I think you said something a minute ago and I was like, oh shit. I was, this is when I think I'd moved away from the door. I'd gone to isolate in a security for a supermarket. And it was just me. So everything was then escalated because I didn't have fucking God knows whoever, as part of the crew.
Yeah.
Not that I didn't like to work like that as such, because otherwise, if I thought that I relied on someone else, which has happened for me over the years of being let down or whatever. But when I got to this new security place and all that, I would use that phrase, don't poke the fucking bear. And I was like, it's like, don't fucking, and it's like, wow, it's like, did I say that? Was I feeling that? Yeah. What was I really saying? And
noticing it is great. You notice it and you observe it and you go, that's not who I am. We go, okay, who was it that was observing it? And the part that's observing it is they call it the observer or the witness. That's the part of that's our authentic self. So we have to reclaim all of those lost parts of ourselves. When we reclaim them, when we go to war with them, this is the internal war. When we go to war with them, that part that we reclaim dies and is liberated. So the nature of it is liberated, and the effulgence, the energy that's locked inside it, comes over to us. So we win our consciousness back by removing everything that isn't consciousness, and that becomes our daily bread, our daily work.
Right.
So that takes a lot of self-honesty, self-awareness, self-examination. So we go, I know I just said that and I said the right words, but I know the intent behind it was a threat. I've said exactly the right words and it looks okay on print, but I know there was a threat behind it. I know the intent wasn't good. I know I've just looked at my child over there and nobody can say much, but she suddenly starts crying because I've given her a hard stare.
Right.
And I remember watching my my brother-in-law once. I watched him. He didn't know I'd seen him, but it was at Christmas time, and he looked over at his stepdaughter, and he gave her such a look, and then she just burst out crying, and everyone goes, God. What's wrong? What's wrong? Right. And he went, what's wrong with her? What's happened? And I knew he'd just been violent with her with a look. She was too scared to say it, or didn't have the understanding to articulate it.
Yeah.
But we've got to know those things in ourselves. We don't want people to be afraid of us. If people are afraid of us, we're never going to be. It's always going to be a restriction on love. We're never going to be able to inspire them. We want to be able to go into a room and leave the room knowing that everybody in that room has been inspired because we've been there. And if that inspiration enters them, then it's also a healing power. And if we're really, really centered in our certainty, then we can sit in a room anonymously and people will be inspired. People will have aspirations. People will be healed just because of our proximity. Anybody that looks into the face of someone that's looked into the face of God also looks into the face of God. If we are in the proximity of somebody that has a center, we are also in the proximity of the center.
Yeah.
And of course, the center attaches to everything. So the way to find out who you are is to start systematically looking at who you're not. You can start by just taking your clothes off and looking in the mirror and go, okay, I'm talking a big game, but have I got control of this vehicle? Have I got control of this vehicle, or did I get battered yesterday by a cream egg? Did I get battered yesterday by 4 beers? Did I get battered by a donut? Did I get battered by
it's true
an image on a screen? Yeah.
And is that
you've got the power?
I'm wary of time, and I think we're all good for time as such. One of the things I wanted to go into was this. I think I've listened, not in a nerdy way. I like the way you talk, mate. I like what you say and all that stuff. So I heard you say something about wanting to go home and that kind of journey. And it really resonated with me. And I wanted to talk about it or hear your view about it, of this. Because I remember going once to myself, I'm like, what's going on here? What's the essence of this? I'm like, I just want to fucking go home. And I know it ain't. I know it ain't to my mum's house or back to where it was. You know, I know that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's yearning within inside me, and I wondered if it is linked to the divinity of. You know, I want to move on to your books in a second, but I wanted to touch upon your, you know, going home and what that is. You know.
Yeah, the home is the center, Andy. We talked about the center. Who am I? The self. So the self, the certainty, God. You would call it whatever you want to call it, but the center, our home, is our own singularity, our own geometric point. That one point in us that everything is built from. It's a place of pure love. We can access it through meditation. We can access it by contracting all of our egoic traits. We can access it by expanding our altruism, by living a better and healthier life. So home is the Buddhists call it the still center. We find the still center. In the still center, there is no illness, there's no need for remedies. In the still center, there's no enemy, so there's no need for an arsenal. In the still center, we recognize that everything out in the world is just a mirror of what's in us. So going home is finding that still center. In Hinduism, they call it, and in Sikhism, they call it the Atman. The Atman is the individual soul. And the Atman connects to the Brahman. The Brahman is the oversoul. So what they say is that the Atman and the Brahman are the same. So it's like when you put a plug into the mains electric. Once you put a plug into the mains electric, the electric that comes through your radio, the Atman, is the same as the electric that's in the mains electric, the Brahman. So the small and the large are the same. So when we connect to the center of ourselves, and it exists in ourselves, we connect to everything. So then our journey or our job is just about contracting all of the parts of us that are not us, until all we're left with is this raw, muscular, dynamic, individual self, or Atman, or soul, or you could call it will. So the kingdom is called will. So going home is about locating that part of us that connects us to God. It's like a direct line to God, or a direct line to an omniscient, omnipotent, omnipresent force that is pretty much impossible to articulate. But if I'm talking to you now and you're inspired, or somebody's listening to this and they're inspired by what we're saying, then they have heard all of God. They've heard all of it, because when we're inspired, we're in spirit. We feel like we can change the world because we know we can. So what we do then is we go, okay, I've just listened to this talk with Geoff and Andi, and I felt inspired. I was connected from my individual singularity to the cosmos, but I want to be there more often. I want to be there all the time. Yeah. So we get rid of all the things in our life that prevent us from doing that. And we can find that through Buddhism, we can find it through Christianity, we can find it through Judaism, we can find it through Sikhism. You know, we can find it through a tree. We can go into nature. And we can communicate, you know, through an oak. You know, in mysticism they call the oak the tree of doors. We can access divinity and talk to divinity through nature. There's nowhere in the cosmos that isn't the center where we can enter from anywhere. But the way to enter is by reducing all the things that we're not, and we get rid of those by doing nothing. That's the highest point of spirituality, is to do nothing. In other words, when it rises up, we don't engage it. When it rises or approaches, we don't engage it. But doing nothing takes a tremendous control of the will. So the whole thing I say to people is, have you got control of your will, or did you get battered by a cigarette yesterday? Did you get battered by a toke yesterday? Did you get battered because you couldn't take your eyes off your friend's girlfriend's arse? You know, How can we mentor people if we're too busy looking at their
Maybe
tips?
it's somewhere else.
How can we mentor somebody? Yeah, how can we mentor somebody if we're too busy looking at the fact, this guy's a millionaire. What would he do for me? What could he do for me?
Yeah.
Who could he connect me to? None of that stuff means anything. We have to look at people that are placed in front of us. We have to have enough control of our will that we don't care who they are or what they are or where they come from, whether they've got one follower or whether they've got 100 million followers. I don't care. All I'm doing is I have a divine introduction to talk to somebody, knowing that when I do that talk, it will go out into the ether, and at some point somebody will sit at 4 o'clock in the morning and go, I feel something through this and I'm going to make inquiries.
I feel reassured about that exchange. And I was like, I think for me, the ultimate currency is this is to me that's like, the Dharma, my path, the vocation, and that path to the divine, if you would. And I think I was doing some work recently and the word divine came up and I thought, oh, really? I really kind of let go of some stuff. And a couple of words came up. One was divine. And I thought, that's not really in my vocabulary. And I know I've heard of your book and it's not outside of my awareness, but it was like, wow, what is that connection, the base of everything with, that's where I want to be. That's to do more of that, and maybe it's time to kind of, I'd love to hear you talk a bit more about divine and maybe how that links in with everything we're saying, and then transition into your books. That'd be nice to hear about. Yeah.
Well, the good thing is that if you hear a word and it triggers an emotion, whoever's spoken that word is your teacher. Because why can a single word pull you out of center, Andy? Me too, not just you. If one of my top students, I was working with a guy called Ian Abernethy. He was a great martial artist on the world stage, and he rang me up and he said, I want to work with you, Geoff. He says, because I listened to a talk you did the other day, and you talked about God, and he said my heart sank, and I thought, oh fucking hell, not that again. And then you said straight afterwards, if the word God offends you, I'm your teacher, you're welcome. And he said, if I can pull you out of center just by using the word God, or if you're a scientist, if you're a religious guy and I can pull you out of center by using the word science, or if you're I remember my friend Tony, who's a pastor, he showed my film about forgiveness to a group of priests, and he said he could have heard a pin drop. Wow. They all wanted to forgive Andy, but no one wanted to forgive a paedophile because they didn't understand what forgiveness was. They didn't have an understanding that forgiveness means to give over. We give it back over to reciprocity. So when people start talking, when a word or a phrase pulls you out of your center and you find yourself emotionally going, oh, well, not that again, then we know that there is something in us that's been dragged out by that. So that's good. The fact that you saw it and you go, I want to inquire about this. Why can that word pull me out of center? You can replace the word divine by just going back to center, going back to the still place in the center. So the divine means to be stripped of vice. It is just this place in between. If you imagine a light bulb, negative terminal, positive terminal, and a filament that joins the two. The filament or the resistance or the conductor creates light. So the negative isn't really bad. Evil isn't bad. And the good isn't good. They're just two different energy forms that need to be connected by the filament of our will. And our will is divine. Our will is what you could call our soul. It's our kingdom. So if I'm able to feel negative emotions, feel positive emotions, and join the two together to create light, which is what we're doing now. So what did you feel before we did this? You felt a negative resistance. You were saying at the beginning, you're going, oh, I'm not ready. And
I tried.
So that negative resistance, your other part of you's gone, no, I'm going to do this. So you've placed your will between negative and positive, and we are currently creating light.
Literally
creating information that's going to, current,
Sorry, just realised that. Sorry.
So it's, you're right, but you're right.
You
are. We are creating currency. That's what it is. We are creating a light that will go out there and work independently of me and you forever. It will be out there, be in the ether. long after, I mean, I get letters from people that say, you wrote to me 20 years ago, 30 years ago, and you go, that was so long ago. Or you put a thing out that so many years ago, and that word spoke to me. Other people have said, you said a word to me and it offended me, and I switched it off straight away. And then I thought, why is that? Why do what's he said that's offended me?
Yeah.
That I need to go back on and look at that.
Yeah.
So we need to recognize that the divinity is when we're in the center. It's when everything comes from a benevolent place. We receive only in order to share. This is the secret to the tree of life.
I love that. Yeah,
I
think that's like, yeah, that really resonates with me. And I think that's something I'm getting like washed over me and go, you fucking received it, now share it and it's going to be all right type thing, and it's
absolutely. But do you know how many people I've done interviews with who have had the intention to do a podcast and share it, but for whatever reason afterwards they've not shared it. So the ego
has crossed my mind
and caught hold of it.
It tried to grab me. You don't have to publish it. I'm like, no.
Yeah, what if people see it? What are people going to think of me?
Yeah.
What if they, So the idea is that if we have to have enough control of the will to be able to receive and then share. Obviously, we receive it and process it through this engine, and then we pass it on to other people. And what we need we will have. But we have to have enough. We have to have enough awareness and control of the will to be able to give away everything that we've been given. Obviously, we're like a tree. We take massively from the earth. We process massively through the trunk. We give out massively through the leaves. There's never a point where that sap isn't in the roots, in the wood, and in the branches and the leaves. So the part of us that processes this information and this knowledge and this energy is never going to go short, because it's always in the process of receiving, processing, and giving. It's like Heathrow. There's always planes stacking to land. There's always planes landing. There's always planes taxiing. There's always planes taking off. That's how my life is. So my job is to make sure that I never stop the flow of energy. And if I'm able to do that, Andy, there is no limit to the amount I can receive. There's no limit to the information I can receive if I'm prepared to pass it on to other people. My whole life, my whole career, all the books I've done and the films and everything, all came from being depressed in my early 20s and saying to myself, when I find the truth, I'm going to share it with everybody. Because I was aware that the people I was reading who promised the truth were afraid to share it in case they looked weak, in case they looked vulnerable. And I said, I'm going to share it. I'm going to give it to everybody. My first book, Watch My Back, I gave it to my brother to read. My brother was my idol. And he said, are you sure you want to share this?
Right.
I said, why? And he said, because you're so vulnerable in this. And I said, but if I can't be vulnerable, Ray, who's it going to help? How's it going to help someone if they think I'm made from Teflon and that I can't be harmed? They need to see my vulnerability. We only connect at the level of vulnerability. We only connect at that level of weakness. And when we're in that place, we're at our strongest. So the idea is that we can have as much as we want if we are prepared to share it. If we don't share it, then it gets polluted, it gets corrupted, and it never sates us. So it's a big secret, but it's obvious, but it's a very difficult thing for people to get their head around, because they don't have an understanding of Dharma, of law. They don't understand reciprocity. They don't understand that what we give is what we receive. There's a lovely saying, there was a man, they called him mad. The more he gave, the more he had. But that's the whole of the Torah. That's the whole of all the Bibles I ever read. The more you give, the more you have. But you have to have courage to put it out there and be vulnerable. Be prepared to be vulnerable. That's how we clean the parts of us that aren't real. That's how we make our vessel cleaner to receive.
It's almost like that's at some stages a little while back, you, as you know, probably yourself, you go through these depressions, the anxiety and the kind of, it needs to have its moment. You need to have the rest. If you've been pushing because you're exhausted. So that has to happen. The grieving has to happen. But at some point, there's this kind of thing where I'm like, look, I'm just like all the old ninja masters, and I'm going to take this with me if I'm not careful. If I'm not careful, that then becomes just like, no, you have to do this. It's almost like that, you know, you're saying with the Buddha going through the narrow gates, it's like, that's the way.
Yeah.
And you can't take this shit
Yeah.
with you, mate. You know, it's,
No,
you
you've got to
can't.
share it.
Yeah.
And
You
if you
got
want
to give
more,
it
if you want
back.
to understand more, you have to make room for it. You can have as much of God as you want.
Yeah, that's
You
the
just need
thing.
to
Yeah,
make
to go
room.
forward, I've got to give back. And it's like, you know, and something you said earlier on about in the doing, that 20%, you know, you only get,
Yeah.
I'm not going to get the next bit I need to go forward without giving that bit back.
Yeah.
And it's,
You
yeah,
won't get it until you share it. You don't know
yeah,
what you know until you share it.
yeah, that's what I mean.
Suddenly you come out with stuff you're thinking, I didn't know I knew that. Well, that's the last 20%. You're going to get that because you're sharing it. And especially if the sharing is difficult. Remember when I did my TED talk, I remember I had a disproportionate build-up of adrenaline. I did 90 hours of practice on that to memorize it, and I had a tremendous
hats off to
build-up.
you, by the way. I noticed. I'm a big fan of that.
It took all of my willpower to go and turn up and do that talk, but that talk is there forever. I created light with that talk. I had to put my whole life into a 16-minute talk and memorize it. And I listen to bits of it now and I can hear the vulnerability in it. And that's what I love, because it's saying to kids out there, I'm an 8th Dan. I've been in life and death situations. I was a doorman for nearly a decade. I am vulnerable. But as St. Paul says, when I'm at my weakest, I'm at my strongest. Because it's the ultimate restriction. When my ego collapses, I open myself up to divinity, to this infinite energy that wants to work through me, that wants to express itself through me. And it's so the same thing. We're coming back to the center. Where's the center? Who am I? Maybe I'm going to have to get rid of that big right cross, because that's the house ghost. That's stopping me from seeing who I really am. Because while I'm activating who I'm not, how am I going to see who I am? So we start to strip away those things. When people come on my courses, Andy, I'd have them maybe for a year sometimes on my black belt courses, on my masterclass courses. And the courses were manufactured environments that were developed in order to bring out people's weaknesses and strengths. So during that period, they would see parts of themselves that they didn't know were there. They would see weaknesses.
Was that the animal kind of,
was
that the animal night stuff? Is it, or that's something different?
The animal day was before that.
Right.
This was a more advanced version of animal day. Right. So the animal day was a way of bringing fighters together, you know, to see what they've got, to see whether it actually worked, to see whether they could rely on it outside the chip shop on a Friday night. It was kind of like an acid bath for martial arts. Later, it became master classes, and I did like a year black belt course for people that were brown belt and above. But the course wasn't really about grades or about learning to fight. The course was about creating a manufactured environment that would show people who they were not, so that they were able to dissolve those parts of themselves and become more absolute. So people are divided several times. There are lots of different personalities within one body. These courses were designed to show people who they were and use that part of who they were in order to clear out who they're not. In other words, it's a bit like someone giving you a nightclub and saying, it's a shithole. Will you come in and clean it up for us?
Right.
So you go in and you, over the process of 2 or 3 months, you find out who's who and you clean the place up. That's what we do with the body. When we take sovereignty over the body, we look at what's right and what's wrong, what's balanced and what's not balanced, you know, where the virtues are, where the vices are, and we clean it up like a nightclub. And we may have to have a few fights on the front door before we get that right. We may have to have a few internal fights and maybe a few depressions along the way. So it's metaphysical doormanship again. You know, we're taking sovereignty of a door, and to take sovereignty of a door, we have to be prepared to put our life on the line. You know yourself, Andy. 4 of my friends were murdered when I was working as a bouncer. It was a very real threat. But internally, it's no different. There will be opposition to us winning back sovereignty of our body, because this opposition, they're squatters. They're used to living in our body. They're used to living off our body. They're used to feeding off it. So we've got to win that sovereignty. I mean, it's a bigger story than this, but if you get a chance to look at something like Eckhart Tolle's book, The Power of Now, it's probably the leading book in the world at the moment on this specific technique of recognizing shadow, or pain bodies, as he calls them, and cleaning them out.
Yeah. He's a lovely character. I like the way he's, you know, obviously quite centered, and it, you know, like yourself, it's It's easy to accept, and actually sometimes easy to not go to,
Yeah,
because it's,
yeah,
you know,
it's
and
true.
it's,
Yeah,
especially at the time of year. Well, I'm just thinking then, I'm like, God, this is the, you know, if you're into the new year, new you kind of stuff, this is, you know, a good way to get on with things. And
yeah, yeah.
I'm just aware of time, and I do want to hear about your books. I've not read your latest two books. I'm not a prolific reader, I'm more of a listener, so I like the audio
Yeah.
books. Did you want to say some stuff about that and how people can access those things? Because obviously I'd like
Yeah,
to know that as well.
yeah, thank you. I've written a book called Notes from a Factory Floor, which is basically covers the period from 1992 when I published my first book, Watch My Back. I was still working in a factory, working as a bouncer, and then, you know, how I went from there to becoming a published writer, a filmmaker, a Bafta winner, teaching for Chuck Norris in Las Vegas, and all of the extraordinary things that happened to me over that 30-year period. All the things I did wrong. It's a confessionary book, so
Right. Okay.
it's, you could say that it's a burnt offering. That was me bringing out all of my sin, all of my errors, and putting them in a public place so that they could be observed by people. So I could say to them, if you think I'm a good bloke or a bad bloke, I don't really mind. This is who
Right.
I've been.
Yeah.
This is who I am. And the Divine CEO is as a book that came to me after I cleared all that stuff out of me from Notes from a Factory Floor. The Divine CEO is what we're talking about here, really. How to create an alignment between the lower soul and the higher soul, between the ego and our upper soul. So how we can access higher knowledge by aligning ourselves, so by becoming congruent, so that our thinking, our saying, and our doing are in alignment with kindness. And we can only get in alignment with kindness if we remove all the elements from our life that aren't kind. We can only remove the things from our life that are not kind if we've got the courage to look at ourselves with a true eye. So when I got my 5th Dan master grade many years ago, I looked in the mirror and I saw a fat, overweight bully, insecure bully. Most people were afraid of me. I was afraid of myself. I didn't even trust my own hands in the dark. I was addicted to pornography. And yet I was supposed to have this master grade. It was shocking. Right. So we have to look at ourselves and go, yes, I am a thief. Yes, I am a bully. There is a corrupt politician in me. There is a violent fundamentalist in me. There is a greedy banker in me. I don't need to raise my fist and shake it at the world. They're in me.
Yeah.
And I see them in me, and I'm going to clear them out. I'm going to convert them. I'm going to convert this base material and create light from it. And it's the conversion of the material into the spiritual. So we have to have the courage to look at ourselves and go, yeah, when I do that, that's not kind. And if we're going to rationalize it, we've got to qualify it. So when you start speaking in the higher echelons of society, you start working with CEOs, company managers, people that work in government, you know, people that have educated themselves. When you start working in these places, you won't justify. I'm not talking about you, Andy, talking about me, or I'm talking generally. We won't justify a lot of the philosophies we've got that nobody questions because they're afraid of us. You go to these places, and even if they're afraid, they'll challenge you. They'll make you qualify what you've got to say. And that's good. You need to be able to qualify it. So when you go into these places, these environments, and they teach you what the truth is. Right. Just like the door, you go on the door, the environment teaches you what works and what doesn't.
Yeah.
If you don't heed the lessons, you might die. When you go into these other areas, these elevated areas in society, and you start passing your message on, they demand qualification. They don't demand it if you're centered. If you're centered, they just go, this guy is centered. You'll be able to hear a pin drop. But if you start saying stuff that you haven't qualified, or you haven't researched, or that you don't know, you're not certain about, they will challenge it and it'll fall apart. And you'll find yourself getting angry in places where that just doesn't work. So what God did with me, and I consider God to be my inner tutor, my intuition, right. It comes through me and it says, I want you to go and talk here. I want you to go and talk there. Don't take your pads. You can't take your pads. And suddenly you're terrified. Yeah. You're senior grade and you're teaching all over the world, but suddenly they put you in front of a few businessmen and you've got no pads and you're terrified because you're going, oh, you know, what am I when I go? And then, so of course you have to find what's what's true in all of these environments. And if you found a truth, or you found a certainty, you can go anywhere and that certainty will be the same. And you'll know it's, like I said, you'll know it's there because you'll feel divinity in the room. You'll hear a pin drop. I've been and talked to places where you literally, you stop in the middle of the talk and you look out of the audience and they're leaning, for everybody in the room is leaning into the talk because they hear divinity not coming from you, Andy, but coming through you.
Yeah.
So it's not you, but it's coming through you. It's not the ego. It's not Geoff Thompson. It's not all of the silly grades and the silly fights. This is divinity coming through you as an essence, as an energy, and they feel it universally. So it's very powerful. So what we go is, I want to do this more. I want to do this more. I want to get rid of everything in my life that hampers this. I want to get rid of everything in my life that stops me from doing this. I'm going to contract myself so I am pure essence. So I'm just a pure vessel for essence. It really encourages you. When you see a talk or the use of magic sound transform somebody's life, and you know it's not you, but it's come through you, you feel so privileged and you think, that's all I want to do. I want to be able to deliver that sound in a book, in a talk, in an article, in a film, in a play, but never at any point will I claim that it's mine. If it's brilliant, it's because it's not mine. If it's mine, it means it's come through the ego and it's limited, But if it comes through me and I'm just a vessel for it, then it can, of course, it can hit the heights of anybody. It can, if I've got the courage to let it come through and the courage to put it out into the world, then it's, I'm pulling from the same places Shakespeare. I'm pulling from the same places Dante or Blake or Milton. I'm pulling from the same places the great philosophers. We're all pulling from the same place. When we go to the center, we're all pulling. We may be pulling with a different signature, but we're pulling from the same place. So that is open to everybody. But in order to get to that place, you need to be able to contract. To expand, you need to be able to contract. So we contract the ego, consciousness expands. When we expand consciousness, automatically we contract the ego. We contract the ego by getting rid of all the vices, and we expand consciousness by practicing things like mindfulness, meditation, clean living. All the kind of things, that the obvious things really. But meditation being the main. Meditation is the main thing. And of course, the biggest house ghost is always with meditation. I've had real physical guys say to me, fucking meditation. I'm not going to sit there and say, there's people dying in the world. They don't realize that the only reason they're reacting like that is because they're afraid of it. The ego going, we don't want to go there. We don't want to go to a place of stillness and quiet. We need noise. We feed off noise. We feed off ambition. We want the violence of the world. Sitting down and doing nothing and being quiet, it's terrifying for the ego. So of course, if we want to expand consciousness, we go to the places where the ego is afraid to go.
That's I remember my first time, it was years ago, and I went to and I'm not a major fan of mindfulness as such, more of a of terms, but I'm obviously a fan of what you said, sitting with stillness and how we define it. But I went there and I'm like, nah, it's not for me. I was just too. It was years back, and I thought, I went to this group and I was, following the doctor's orders. And I've heard you say before, his answer was in a bottle of fucking pills, and I was looking for the truth, and I couldn't share my part with people to help them help me, because I didn't really know then what that was. But I remember walking into the room and there's all this mindfulness going on. I'm like, fuck that, and obviously since then I've used it as a practice, one that I think you need to sharpen. Like you say, it's got to be a daily practice. You've got to catch yourself on and this way over here, Andy, and usher.
Compound interest comes from regular practice. Compound interest.
Definitely. I think it was Tyson Fury's young coach a little while back that helped him through, and he's like, routine, consistency, and structure. And as soon as I heard those words, I'm like, Andy, you need, the routine, the consistency to give you the compound interest. And listen, Geoff, I'm aware of the time for you.
Well, they can get the books through the normal places, the Divine CEO, Notes from the Factory Floor, all the stuff we've talked about, pretty much everything I know is recorded in those books. It's not just about the books, it's about the fact that, I'll talk about all my influences, and it will lead them, it will open portals to other places for people. So they'll read it and they'll get the references to some of the books we've spoken about, some of the religions I've looked at, some of the practices I do. When you open a book, you are opening a portal. It's worth your last penny. Not just my book. If you're going to choose a book today, choose The Power of Now by Eckhart Tolle. It's the best book in the world at the moment for clearing shadow. So it's a very popular book, but it has a very deep esoteric meaning, and he speaks in a very accessible language. And if you're not keen on reading, he does an audio as well, which is very good. But my own kids are grown up, but 3 of my kids went to New York to sit with Eckhart Tolle.
Oh, right.
Train with him. All my kids follow the teachings as well.
Yeah.
I've really encouraged them to, these have gone through not understanding spirituality at all to suddenly being in the room with Eckhart Tolle and in the room with the mother, who was another great mystic who's still around at the moment. So it's not just that you can access the books, you can access the teachers, you can be in front of them. You can, you can bring that into your front room. They're there.
That's what we're doing.
Most of these kids are offering stuff online free. Yeah, most of them are offering stuff online free as well. So, they're there for you. And as we said before, the more you do, the more you'll hear. When you start doing the work, when you start converting your negatives into light, into positivity, other teachers will appear and other teachers will present themselves. It's available, it's accessible.
I think the hats off to you. I'm thinking, thank you for everything you've shared, and it was, I was going back to the start of it. I was that 38-year-old boy, sat there, going, oh my God. And it helps you through it. And I thought, this man's given this, and for me, I think I had issues with trust, obviously, but I didn't want to accept things for free, because for me, that came with this, I want, this person has ulterior motives. But when obviously people are giving, and it's a hard thing to accept, but it was very well received, and obviously has led to us talking today. And there's still a million things I'd love to ask you, so I'd love to have you back on at some point again soon. I could pick your brain a lot, So
I think it's good to give people an appetizer, and it's good to go away and process what's happening, what's been said. And if it just triggers one idea, one level of inquiry, then it's done its job. And it's people think that they're stuck, they think there's no way out, but there's always a way out, and the way out is the way in. Or the way in is the way out.
I think I love it, and I think that's, I've got lots from this, and I'm sure people, obviously will get what they need to take from it as well. So I was tempted to ask you like one last question. I remember Brian Rosa asks always at the end, what is the advice you give to the younger you? And I thought, do I, what advice would you give to the younger Geoff?
The advice I would give to him is that, everything you want is right in front of you. Realized eschatology from the Christian canon, it's from lots of the different faiths, basically says that the second coming of Christ is not an external phenomena. It's the second coming is the coming of consciousness. It's waking up, it's becoming aware. That's available to everybody now. You don't even have to leave your front room for this. You don't have to go anywhere. You just have to turn into it and go, I want to look at this. I want to do work on this. You have to start questioning what's happening. That's basically what I did. I found some courage from somewhere in the middle of a depression. And I just thought, I'm not having this anymore. I'm not living like this. I'm going to confront everything I'm afraid of. And when I confronted everything I was afraid of, I was shocked to realize that everything I was afraid of had no reality. It just dissipated as soon as I confronted it. When I intercoursed with it, my consciousness expanded. The elements that I was afraid of liberated, and the energy just expanded me. So people may tell you that there's not a way out, that there's not a way home, there's not a way back. but there is an energy in the universe that wants you to come home, that wants you to return to the still center. And if you turn towards that, even if you just say, I'm not sure what to do, I'm a bit scared and I'm skeptical, but I want to change, that force will start to bring a talk in front of you, a book in front of you. Might just be a line. I remember being on my knees, Andi, in Edinburgh, going through a regeneration process. On my knees. I thought I was going to die in Edinburgh. I felt so ill.
Right.
And somebody in the street just handed me a pamphlet with blue guys on the front, and it was extracts from the Bhagavad Gita. And I'd never heard of it. And I remember looking at it and thinking, I opened it up at random. It was talking about sovereignty, self-sovereignty, and it went. Poof. So I read this tiny little pamphlet that led on to the Bhagavad Gita.
Yeah.
The Bhagavad Gita is like that. The Bhagavad Gita led on to the Mahabharata. The Mahabharata led on to the Srimad Bhagavatam, which is like 16 volumes. And the Srimad Bhagavatam is from the Vedic canon, which is 500,000 verses long. Basically, it was saying to me, there is an unlimited amount of light and information out there for you. But I had to start from my weakest point, and I had to pick the leaflet up and I had to read it.
Right.
And then I had to follow that through to the other book. I read the Gita, I thought, it's a tome. I've done really well. And he said, well, this is just one chapter from the Mahabharata. So I got the Mahabharata, and I read full time until I finished it. And I thought, I've done well. I've finished the Mahabharata. And then at the end, it said, this is just a section of the Srimad Bhagavatam. So my kids bought me 16 volumes of the Bhagavatam. Right. The moment I bought the Bhagavatam, which is the fruits of the Vedas, which are 3,500 years old. The moment I bought that, I had an invitation from a Hindu priest to come and study with him. He'd heard I'd read the Bhagavatam.
Right.
And he was shocked because most Hindus don't read the Gita, let alone the Bhagavatam, because it's a big investment. So I went and he told me two things. On the first meeting, he told me two things, like he'd read my mind, that I knew were right. And it doesn't really matter what they were. They were very personal to me.
Right, okay.
But I changed them that day. And then he introduced me to a temple in London, and suddenly I've got 20 teachers in this temple.
Right.
Not just 20 teachers, but access to the library at this temple in London, in Sloane Square. And within this library, I bought the Yoga Vasishta. I bought loads and loads and loads of different books on Hindu philosophy. It was transformative, but that was because I did the work. When we do, we hear. So the moment I got to a certain level, I started to attract not just the books, but the physical teachers. And the physical teachers led me on to other books, and the other books led me on to other physical teachers. And eventually you realize that whether it's a book or a teacher didn't really make any difference. You know, the teacher was alive in the book. Yeah. And the book was alive in the teacher. So I think that would be a good thing to finish on.
I think I just love it.
So yeah,
it's a beautiful thing, and I love how it works. And I think
it's amazing, isn't it? It's amazing.
And there you have it. Please click and subscribe, like.